Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Miranda, holding her martini glass, adjusted her exotic wide-brimmed hat. The sun was baking mercilessly today, but Miranda was as happy about it as a child. It had been so long since she'd let herself go out, and she seemed to absorb the sun's rays with her whole body. And that black figure was dressed in a fashionable swimsuit. Not a drop of fat, not a gram of cellulite, not a single stretch mark or treacherously protruding vascular star. Her body was flawless, and no one could have given her more than 20 years, and she was already 32 years old. Of course, behind this magnificent body and flawless face was a daily labor requiring a lot of physical and material costs. Labor and those standing and could not cleanly allocate time for herself to go on vacation. In the care of her body and face, she did not deny herself, and she was satisfied with the result. From the rear, she leaned back on the back of the chaise lounge, smiled and sighed. Everything was going well for her. At least, she assured herself that she thought she was very lucky. Not everyone is so lucky in life. She was still quite young, and she had already accomplished so much. And although many people thought that everything and got it easy, and only with the help of her parents, it wasn't. Yes, her parents helped her at the start, but the rest she was able to get everything on her own. Miranda grew up in a good family, and she was an only child. Her parents were wonderful people. Sebastian and Lisa were heartwarming. They were born quite late in life. Both of them were already in their late 40s, they told her. When she asked when they were young, they were busy with their careers and had no time to have children. And when they did, Miranda was born. They never had any more children, and it was too late for children and health. Lisa couldn't be completely sure of having another healthy child. The doctors warned her that everything has its time. The couple decided not to take any risks. Miranda did not remember her childhood well, but she was sure it was a happy one. When she grew up, she once asked her parents why they didn't have any pictures of her as a child. And her parents, slightly engaged, answered her, "Oh, daughter, we ourselves still can't forgive ourselves for not keeping track of it. The thing is, when you were 4 years old, we lost the picture box when we moved. Just with it were all your and baby pictures. When we went through our stuff, we found all the boxes of pictures, but not yours. We don't know how that could have happened. Where did that box go? We have no idea." Indeed, they only had the pictures that Miranda was at least 4 years old. Miranda was satisfied with this answer, although she was a little sad that she couldn't see herself as a baby. Miranda had grown up well off, never needing anything. And at the same time, her parents taught her that not everything falls from the sky, and that every successful person should be something. And she knew what her parents were talking about. Since she was a little girl, she understood. When she went to school, she was determined to get a gold medal, but not by bribing teachers, but by her own mind. And she achieved it. And her parents were proud of her. When Miranda was in the 8th grade, she realized that she wanted to lead, and preferably not some enterprise and the whole city. Of course, many people thought Miranda was dreaming too big, but her parents believed that if she really wanted something, she could achieve everything. After school, Miranda entered one of the most prestigious universities and entered on a budget. Her friends and many acquaintances thought that her parents paid for everything, but it was not so. Miranda entered on her own. She took exams like everyone else, and she passed. Her friend Kelly was the only one who believed Miranda was making her own way. She and were very close. They were best friends. Only Kelly was the only one that Miranda trusted completely. Only Kelly knew all her secrets. Only Kelly knew what was going on in her heart. And only Kelly was always on her side. There was always a lot of hanging around, because Miranda was good at everything and tired. There were always a lot of fans. Wherever the girl appeared, she was always surrounded by guys with admiring looks. This annoyed almost all other representatives of the fair sex, and Miranda treated it calmly. Despite the constant attention of the male sex, Stallone led a promiscuous lifestyle, changing guys like other popular girls at school or university. Miranda had a calm attitude towards love adventures and was passionate about many other things in life. What she paid attention to: she was very fond of traveling, and her parents never denied her. She traveled with them often. When she grew up, she started traveling to different places and countries. It was important to her. Not another guy who either tried to bed her down or wanted to marry her because she became a very enviable bride. It wasn't until her 4th year of college that Miranda fell in love. They started dating, but their relationship did not last long because Miranda caught her boyfriend with her classmates and who had been after him for a long time. That's how her first love adventures ended before bed never came to bed. After graduation, Miranda began her journey to the top. First, she got additional education to raise her levels and familiarity. She had been proving to the head of the personnel department for a long time that she could work and would be useful to anyone under whose supervision she would be. The head of HR immediately realized that this girl would go far, and he liked her. Maybe the head of HR just had his eye on her, and he was counting on something when he was going to hire her. But as soon as she started her duties, she tactfully made it clear that her first priority was work, not personal relationships. And when the head of the personnel department tried to induce her to intimate relations, the girl clearly stated her position. "I'm telling you right away that I will not sleep with any of the employees, just because that's the way it is around here. This applies not only to you, but absolutely everyone. So don't get angry or offended. It's not your fault. And if you tell me now that you can't do without it, I will have to answer you that then I don't belong here. It's not in my nature to mix personal life and work. And if you tell me that in this way I will quickly achieve success, I will answer you that I do not need it. I will achieve everything myself. And if it doesn't work out, then so be it. And in general, I enter into relationships only by mutual sympathy and love, not just for work out of boredom or necessity. Sorry, but this is my position, and I had to voice it to you so that you have a complete picture of me." Standing there, thinking she was gonna get fired, she was already making plans where to go next. But strangely enough, the head of HR didn't fire her. Maybe he'd never seen such a tactical and reasoned response in his entire life, and that was worthy of respect. The head of the personnel department perceived her not just as a beautiful blank, but as a worthy employee who would go far just because of her mind and aspirations, not because of a beautiful pilot and an adorable body. Strangely, no one else openly offered. They stole the bed. If there were any hints, they expressed his sincere sympathy and respect for them. The head of HR had apparently reported to everyone that Miranda was not so-and-so just a flake, a personality worthy of respect. And the journey upward began. Miranda gradually gained the trust of everyone who worked with her. And after many years, she came closer to her dream. She certainly didn't run the city like she said in school, but she wasn't the last personality either. She became chief of the finance department, and she became the youngest chief among all in the administration. Of course, she had to get another education to achieve her goal. Her parents were always amazed at how she managed everything. It seemed that Miranda did nothing else but work and study. Lisa was very worried that her daughter would never get married. However, Miranda did. When she was 27 years old, she met David, and she immediately fell in love with him. The feelings were mutual, and within 3 months of meeting him, they were married. Miranda had never been happier. She plunged headlong into new sensations. Yes, he wasn't her first man. Naturally, Miranda realized that for her own health, she had to date men. She did, but the relationship never got serious. But with David, it was different. It was like he was her soulmate. Miranda felt it physically, and she was happy. Miranda took a sip of her martini, and a sad expression appeared on her face. She was always sad when she thought about the fact that her parents hadn't lived to see her current success. When Miranda was 26 years old, her father became ill. He had a serious blood disease, and needed a bone marrow transplant. Of course, Miranda wanted to become a donor, but her father flatly refused to do so. Stala tried to convince her mother to talk her father into it, but the mother, strangely enough, reacted the same way as the father. She was against Miranda being involved in this. "You don't have to. Daughter, you don't have to do this. You have your whole life ahead of you, and we're already old. And God will dispose of our lives himself. Try as I might, I tried to use all my connections to save my father. It didn't work. Dad died. His mother followed him 3 months later. She couldn't bear to be separated from the only love of her life. It was an ordeal for the home front to lose both parents at once. You wouldn't wish it on an enemy. But she coped. She coped because she had David and her beloved. David. He was her rock and her support. And he was there for her all the time she was so bad she couldn't eat or drink or work anything. He pulled her out of her depression after her parents died. When Miranda recovered, she took up work again. Everyone sympathized and gave her as much vacation time as she needed. But 2 weeks after the funeral, Miranda was back on the job, and she was ready to keep working and succeeding. And she was succeeding. Miranda finished the rest of her martini and set the empty glass on the table. She sighed and looked at her right hand. On her hand was a gold bracelet with a pendant. The bracelet was quite ordinary, but the pendant was noteworthy. It was an unusual piece of jewelry that attracted the gaze of many who noticed it. It was a gold drop with an emerald in the middle, and there would be nothing unusual about it. If it weren't for one small detail on the back of the pendant, there was also a stone. It was a small diamond, and it was hidden behind a back that moved to the side with a little effort. This pendant was given to the table by her mother. She said that this pendant was customized after Miranda was born. And this pendant is a protective pendant that will keep the girl safe from any harm. As a child, Miranda believed that. She cherished the pendant, and she didn't know then that the stones on the column were precious. But it seemed like they were worthless. It wasn't until Miranda grew up and became knowledgeable about gemstones that she began to suspect that the stone behind the pendant and was a diamond. She took the pendant to a jeweler, and he confirmed the authenticity of the stone. Miranda did not question her mother as to why she had been deceived. Maybe she just said so to girls who knew nothing about jewelry. This pendant lay in a secluded place for many years. After her parents died, Miranda pulled it out and pinned it to the summer. It had never been parted from her since. It reminded her of her childhood parents, of everything that had happened to her. And Miranda believed this pendant had protective powers. Do you want more, or is it enough to make her flinch when she heard a voice beside her? She looked up. It was the waiter who served the guests by the pool from morning until late at night. He had brought her 2 glasses before, and the usual business was limited to that. But that memory made her wistful, and she felt she needed more. "Yes, please. Can I have another glass?" "Only an incomplete one, please," she politely replied, giving the waiter her charming smile that left no one indifferent. The waiter glowered, furtively gazing at her long, slender legs. Then he grabbed the empty glass and quickly left. Stoila always left a good tip. Therefore, the entire service staff was happily waiting for her. 2 minutes later, Miranda was already holding a martini glass. It was only half full. Any whim of the customer was fulfilled at once. That's what people pay money for, to spend their vacations in comfort and without stress. Miranda took a sip and suddenly realized she didn't feel like drinking anymore. She sighed and closed her eyes. She remembered the true reason for coming here. She had fled her hometown to avoid falling into total despondency after her divorce from David. Yes, at first they had been doing well. They had lived soul to soul. And she naively believed that it would always be like that. She believed she'd met her one and only love. And she dreamed that she would live with you all her life, like her mother did with her father. And she really believed that she would. After her parents died, David was very reverent towards her. He helped her with all the matters related to inheritance. Naturally, Miranda was not going to be involved in her father's business, and she decided to sell everything on David's advice. It was David who handled all matters related to the sale. All she had to do was to be present to sign the documents and hand over the money. David advised to deposit the money in several banks into different accounts. They transferred an impressive amount of money into currency and opened an overseas account. She trusted her husband in these matters, and she had no time to deal with all this. She was working. Stoila wished to deposit some money into her husband's account. He seemed to resist, but he was pleased that his wife appreciated him so much, and everything seemed to be going well. But it was only an appearance. Of course she should have. She didn't realize it right away. Honestly, she only realized it when the divorce was in full swing. She analyzed all of David's actions with a clear head, and only then she realized that he had not been completely honest with her from the beginning. Alas, she didn't realize it. Then, if she had realized it at once, then all this nightmare and humiliation would not have been in her life. David was always affectionate and gentle. Worth had never said a bad word about him, and she couldn't say a single bad word about him. In bed, they were fine. Everything suited her. She thought, she was sure, that David was too. But then something changed, and I did. She couldn't even understand when the turning point came, when everything went wrong. They were slowly drifting apart, but Kost didn't notice it. She was so busy in meetings and appointments that she sometimes came home close to midnight, and sometimes David wasn't home. But she believed his excuses, that he was late on business, that he met with friends somewhere, that he was invited to a birthday party, or to a party at someone's house. And I became sure that maybe some of what he said was true. But I don't think so. And somehow she realized she really wanted to have a baby. She wanted to talk to her husband, but first she decided to make sure that she was in good health. In a great mood, she went to the doctor. She took all the necessary tests and underwent the recommended examinations. But when she went to the doctor, again, it was as if she was being rolled with cold water. The doctor said that she had to undergo treatment, and a very long treatment, some problems with hormones, and she had to take hormonal drugs for a long time. And all of this is no guarantee that she will be able to become a mother. There is a possibility that she will never be able to get pregnant. This came as a shock to Miranda. She didn't know how to tell War about it. Of course, they hadn't broached the subject of children yet, but the clock was ticking, and the further they put off discussing it, the more likely it was that they would never have a child again. And worth it, she decided to talk to her husband. She began to explain to him that she had been to the doctor. David listened attentively, her standing, expecting anything but indifference. She thought that David would be worried too, that he would reassure her, support her as he had supported her after her parents' deaths. But he didn't. He just looked at her without emotion. When she told him everything, he smirked and said to her, "And let me ask you this. Since when are you the only one who makes the decision to have a baby or not? You asked me. I'm somehow involved in such an important process. You weren't going to ask me if I wanted to have a baby, or you were just going to confront me with the fact." Miranda was stunned, but didn't know what to say. She had just gone to the doctor after all. And why is he making such a claim as if she had deceived him in some way? She just went to the doctor for a checkup, and he looked at her like she'd cheated on him. But that's not what I meant. It's not like I'm putting you on the spot. I'm just saying I'm gonna have to get treatment to get pregnant. I'm afraid it won't work. And then do we have to start all this? Puzzled, she told him. But David did not appreciate her excuses. He answered her categorically like this: "I tell you right away that children are out of the question. At least not yet. And you don't know what's new. I thought you could get treatment if you needed it, but we're not going to talk about children just yet." It was clear David didn't want kids, so it was just a case of the two of them getting together. Miranda couldn't imagine that he wouldn't support her. They never returned to the subject again, but she decided that she would get her way, as she always does. She began to look for ways to make her husband want a child. She just thought that he needed to explain that there was nothing wrong with it, and then he would relax and be at one with her. It was worth it. She realized that it had been a very long time since she had spent time with her husband, and she decided that this was what was bringing discord to their relationship, and if she didn't do anything about it, it could end up being quite dire, which she didn't want to happen. And one fine, or rather terrible day, Miranda called her husband and said she would be late for a meeting, wishing her luck. But there was no meeting. The day before, she had bought new sexy lingerie, and she was going to give her husband an extraordinary surprise. She had solved all the cases from the morning, had 3 meetings and a meeting. In principle, she could leave. Work wouldn't be affected. And Miranda would be home much earlier to prepare for her husband's arrival, would meet him dressed up, excited, and even then she would talk to him. And she would explain her point of view to him. And she believed that she would be able to convey to him the simple truth. They just needed a child. Miranda's wonderful mood arrived home. When she opened the door, she was surprised to find that David was home. She immediately heard him laughing. He was talking to someone. Miranda cursed to herself. She had hoped to surprise him, and now it wouldn't work. She would have to adjust to the situation. She listened. David was silent. She must have been on the phone. Before that, then I decided to quickly hop into the bathroom and change into my new underwear. She tiptoed into the bathroom. Carefully, she turned on the light and went in to quickly change. She left her things and went into the bedroom. Where was the voice coming from? Yes, Miranda naively thought she would give her husband a surprise, a pleasant surprise. But it was David who gave her a surprise, and not a pleasant one. There was a girl at home, but not alone with him. The scene recognized her immediately. It was Slaga's husband's secretary. David and Slaga were completely naked. They were lying on their marital bed without even covering themselves. When Miranda walked into the bedroom in her underwear, she stopped abruptly in the doorway. A smile froze on her face. For a few seconds, all the faces present looked at each other. Then Clara made a strange sound and covered herself with the sheet. Strangely, David was completely calm, and he didn't even bother to cover himself. He looked at the glass from head to toe and grinned and stood silently. And then David said, "Wow, I got lucky. 2 ladies in bed at once. Would you like to join us?" Stoila finally regained her speech. She sighed noisily, then could barely speak. "How? What does that mean?" Clara pulled the sheet even tighter. She looked fearfully at her chief, but David was completely calm. "That's what it means. You're the smart one. You should know how." "How dare you, Vanya? Are you out of your mind?" loudly said Miranda. Clara realized that the scandal could not be avoided. She looked for her clothes. "And what is your own fault? You came home. Why did you come? You said I was staying late. What's this all about? You're trying to get at me for something. Here you go. I made it bigger. Does that make you feel better? Please, put something on. You look ridiculous in that underwear and that stupid look on your face, for God's sake." From the rear, blushing with anger and shame, she had completely forgotten that she was standing almost naked. She went in search of her robe, which she had left in public this morning. The robe was there standing there. Grabbed the robe, threw it over herself and tangled herself in it, trying with shaking hands to climb up her aunt. David, unwaiting for an explanation, "And let this girl now leave our house immediately," Miranda almost shouted. David raised one eyebrow. Slaga twitched, trying to get up from the bed, but he didn't hold her hand. "This girl's name is Slyra, and you know it, Miranda. And she's not leaving until you're out of the bedroom. She needs to get dressed. I don't want her to resent the sight of you, so leave while she's getting dressed." I was stunned at the insolence. She wouldn't have gone out if she hadn't felt sick. She just started to feel nauseous. She felt like if she didn't get out of here right now, she was going to throw up. And she needed a drink of water right away. If it wasn't for that, she would have pulled this daughter out of her own bed by her hair. 10 minutes later, Slaga left, and David threw on his robe and went into the kitchen. Slaga was sitting at the table, clutching a glass of water with both hands. "I understand that you're going to throw a tantrum, but I don't advise you to do it. It won't accomplish anything. It's just gonna make things worse. We need to break up peacefully. Yes, despite me being so surprised I'm going to divorce you, and I didn't really want to marry you to begin with. But your parents were so happy to have me. Your father promised to give me part of his firm later, and I thought it was a very good deal. Except your father left everything and left me nothing. He didn't keep his promise. Good thing you put the money in my personal account. At least I got something. So I don't see the point of being with you anymore. I'm sick of you being busy with your work all the time. All you love is yourself. I'm just your plaything. I'm sick of it. That's not true. I love her. I love you very much, Miranda said quietly. David brushed it off. Maybe she did, but in her own way. But it doesn't matter. I've made up my mind, and I don't need your consent. Now I'll pack my things and leave. I'll see you in court later. I hope you won't make a scene or come after me or Clara. It's not her fault. She loves me, that's all. And I'm just having a nice time with her. Miranda shuddered and stirred. She looked up, not realizing where she was. She was probably napping by the pool. As she thought about the divorce, her brain seemed to shut down, as if she didn't want to remember the horror and shame of it all. David was left with the money. She didn't go to the trouble of trying to take her money away from him. She decided to let him go because she didn't even want to talk to him. She just went to court and signed all the papers. She even agreed to his demands to keep the car she gave him as a gift. Sebastian. After the wedding, Miranda wanted nothing from him. And when he came to pick up all his stuff after everything, she just left for that time. She couldn't be at home with him there with that cocky smirk on his face. After David, she promised herself not to trust men anymore. She felt so for him. She loved him so much. She trusted him, and he was just taking advantage of her. Well, she would never let that happen again. And she'll never marry again. She could have men, but no one else would ever be able to bind her in marriage. Miranda stretched, looked down at her martini glass, and wrinkled her nose. No, that's really enough for today. She needs to go take a shower, get some sleep, and then get changed for dinner. Tonight she would wear her prettiest dress, because tonight was her last night of rest. After dinner, she will dance till she falls, smile, and have fun. Tomorrow she will fly home and start a new life where there is no room for people who cheat her and take advantage of everything she has to give. 3 months have passed. Miranda plunged headlong into her work. Now she was not distracted by her family life. Now she was in no hurry to go home, because no one was waiting for her there. It was dreary at home. Kelly advised her friend to get a cat or a dog, but she dismissed the idea out of hand. And how do you envision that? I'm hardly ever at home. You're never gonna see a dog. Who's gonna walk it? I don't have a cat, and I'm not getting one. She can do it without me, if I'm out all day. But will it love me? What's the point of having a cat if it's going to sit alone all day? It won't even come to me. I don't want to condemn an animal to suffering. It would be unfair and cruel, she replied. Kelly sighed tunefully and replied, Then at least have a baby, right? That would be something. I feel sorry for you, Miranda, honestly. Why are you pushing yourself so hard? Who's benefiting from it? You're only making it worse for yourself. That traitor isn't the only man in the world. Look around you. There are so many good men who'd give you the moon. You just don't have to be so unapproachable. I'm not resisting. Let him give me the moon from the sky, treasure from the bottom of the sea. What else can they give me? I don't mind. It's just that no one else can possess my soul. I don't want to sit down with someone again, meet someone, go to a restaurant somewhere, anything. That's no problem. But I don't want to see anyone at home. I'd rather have a real fish. At least they won't hurt me, Miranda replied, signaling that the conversation was over. Miranda got the fish a nice big aquarium that took up half the wall. She hired a special person who picked out fish that didn't require much care and constant supervision. Now she came home and admired them. She even talked to them. Sometimes she would ask something, but the answer was silence. Miranda, though she didn't admit it, was very lonely. Lisa had her own life, her own family. She had no one close to her. After her parents died, she was left alone, and there were no relatives she could keep in any kind of contact with. Sometimes Miranda wondered why it was so, why her parents didn't have any relatives, and why they gave birth to her so late. She was just alone and didn't know how to deal with this longing in her soul that pressed down on her every day. Time passed, and the loneliness continued to depress her. The fish no longer pleased her. And then it was worth it. She decided to get treatment to have a baby. She went to a doctor. She was prescribed treatment. She started the treatment. No, there was hope that everything would be all right. Kelly supported her, said Miranda could still find someone she wanted to have a baby with. But it was worth cutting off her friend's hopes right away. She said she wasn't gonna get married and have a baby. She would just use the services of a sperm donor and find a suitable candidate, and the deed will be done. She'll have the baby just for herself. I was shocked when a few months went by. The doctor said it was okay to try to get pregnant, but unfortunately it didn't work. It didn't work the second time, and the third, and the fourth. And then Miranda realized that she would never be able to give birth to a child. She was doomed to eternal loneliness, and she would never have a person around her who would be dear to her. But at work, Miranda was doing well. She was successful. She was respected by everyone. She was a great manager. One day, Miranda was walking out of work. She stopped in front of the building, wondering what she should do on a Friday night. Back in the afternoon, she had called Kelly. She was busy. She was going out of town with her family. Of course, she had invited Miranda to go with them. She didn't want to get in their way. Kelly was also working hard, her husband, and they wanted to spend time together with their child. Why? Would it be worth it to get in their way? If Miranda wasn't alone, but she wouldn't go with them on her own or with anyone else, much less with them. Standing, and staring ahead, not noticing anything around her. And then she felt someone rubbing her sleeve. Miranda saw a grimy girl standing next to her, about 12 years old. The girl was very thin and pale. Huge eyes stood out on her face. She stared at the steel, almost unblinking, and the hair was pulled out in a braid, but very carelessly, as if the braid had been invented a few days ago. I guess the girl would have even been pretty, if not without her uniform. She had some kind of face on her too. Followed by me banished, as if for a few days on washing her hands looked even worse. Miranda felt sorry for the child. That's where justice is in this world. She is successful, rich, well-mannered, kind, cannot have children. For the sake of a child, she would give up everything she had. Some alcoholics, drug addicts, lazy people and shovels of dew give birth, as if it is as easy as going to the neighborhood store. Such people breed poverty and illiteracy, unable to educate and support their children. And such people don't care how many children they give birth to because they don't give a shit about them. Like this girl. She's probably the daughter of the disadvantaged. He looks at her and doesn't say a word. Maybe her parents sent her to beg for a bottle or something worse. Just couldn't look at that child without tears. Miranda regretted that she didn't have anything with her. She usually carried a candy bar in her purse to snack on when she didn't have time for lunch or dinner. But now she had nothing. "Come with me to the store. I'll buy you something tasty that you want," said Miranda to the girl. But the girl shook her head. It was worth it. She was very surprised. She didn't think she would refuse. Of course she stood. Didn't want to give the girl money because she didn't believe that this child would spend it on something necessary and good. She would probably take the money to her parents, and they would use it as they saw fit. It was unlikely that they would spend it on the child. Miranda sighed and opened her purse. She rummaged through her purse, but Miranda didn't usually carry cash. She paid everywhere with a card. It was only worth 300 R worth. Took the money and held it out to the girl with the words, "My dear, I really beg you, buy yourself something with this money. I really want you to spend it on yourself. Promise me that you will buy something for yourself." But the girl shook her head and pulled her hand away from her. My heart ached. That's an honest girl. Can't even lie about spending the money on herself. But she held out the money to her anyway, then let her take it to her parents anyway. Maybe she'll still get some. Take it. I don't have any more, unfortunately. But the girl shook her head again and pushed Miranda's hand away. Then the girl reached into her blouse pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. She held it out to Miranda, looking questioningly into her eyes. Miranda was intrigued. She realized that the girl still hadn't said a word. Maybe it's not mine. Miranda picked up a piece of paper and unfolded it. It was a note in scrawled handwriting. It had an address written on it and a plea for help. Just 3 words. Please help me. That's all. The handwriting was very messy, but it was definitely not written by a child. It was adult handwriting, as if written by someone who couldn't move his hand very well. Miranda looked at the girl in surprise, who continued to look at her with interest. And then the girl's gaze lingered on her hand and the arm where the bracelet from the pendant hung. Stola realized that it was the child asking for help. But this way you can run into some crooks who will go to this address and do something bad. It's a good thing the note got into her hands. After all, Miranda will never hurt anyone. Here comes Miranda. If this note was meant for her, suddenly danger awaits her, where she is to be led, lured. Is this note to me personally, or could you have given it to anyone? She asked the girl. The girl shook her head, pointed a finger at her. So this note was personal to her. How strange. But why? Asked Miranda in a half voice. The doctors rather to themselves than to the girl. But the girl didn't answer this time either. She smiled slightly and pointed her finger at the pendant hanging on her bracelet. Miranda was even more surprised. Something strange was going on here. Could she have ill-wishers who wished her harm? I suppose anyone could have them. What if she's in terrible danger? If she later regretted going to this address? Miranda didn't know how to respond to that, but she realized from her thoughts that she had already decided what she was going to do next and be what she would. At least she would find out why this girl was so interested in her bracelet. Stola nodded and said, "Girls, okay, now we'll get in my car and we'll go." Okay, the girl smiled and nodded. As they drove, Miranda watched the girl in the mirror. The girl was delighted. It was immediately obvious that she had never ridden in such a fancy car. Maybe she had never been in a car either. It was all so strange. When they were already pulling up, according to the navigator, Worth was surprised to find that they were in a very strange neighborhood was in. She had never been here before. But it was understandable. It was the outskirts of the city. And there were mostly old huts and barracks. When they got to the right place, Standing couldn't believe they had to come here. She looked questioningly at the girl, so nodded to her. She herself got out of the car, carefully closed the door, and beckoned her hand for Miranda to follow her. Miranda sighed and wished she had carried her pizza and spray can with her. She had the house lying around somewhere. It would come in handy in her bag right now. Miranda got out of the car and looked around at the slum that was so dreary. Her car looked out of place against all those old houses. Very strange. Miranda walked up to the house the girl was standing near. Actually, it didn't even look like a house. Some kind of old barn. The girl beckoned her again and opened the rusty gate. Miranda tried to go inside so that she wouldn't touch anything. Otherwise, her light-colored costume could be thrown away. Miranda gingerly entered the cabin. Strangely, the house was clean. The old furnishings, the lack of repairs for years now was clean. The girl dismounted. She took off her shoes as well. By the relief that appeared on the girl's face, she realized that the girl herself keeps the house clean. So she was apparently afraid that Miranda did not want to take off her shoes and go barefoot. Staley didn't even care anymore whether she went barefoot or not, whether the place was clean or dirty. She was so intrigued by what was happening that she was only thinking about what awaited her next. The girl led Miranda through the small kitchen room, the only room in the cabin. And as Miranda entered the room, she saw a woman standing on the bed, standing by the small window. And as soon as Miranda saw this woman, and her heart began to pound harder. At first, she thought it was all in her head. She kept looking and looking at this woman. And with every second, she became more and more convinced that this woman was very much like her. Then the woman saw the steel. Her eyes brightened. She said slowly, "Lisa, you found her. You brought her to me. My favorite girl. How smart are you?" Standing there in shock. But she had no idea what would happen next. "I really wanted to see you," said the strange woman. Stoila shook her head slightly. "Do we know each other?" "I doubt it," slowly said Miranda. The woman smiled, but immediately grimaced in pain. After a few seconds, her face got sharply better, and she looked at the wall again. "Could you come closer? Please." For some reason, she felt an awful urge to run away, and it seemed as if some terrible danger awaited her. Her imagination was running wild, and she thought the woman was going to attack her with a knife. But then Miranda calmed herself down. She probably would have done it by now if she wanted to or could. And why did they look so much alike to her anyway? Miranda moved closer, and then the strangest thing that had ever happened in their lives happened. The woman reached under her shirt and pulled out a chain that hung around her neck. And on that chain you saw a pendant. The exact same pendant as her bracelet. "You know him, don't you?" asked the strange woman. Tensely gazing into her face, standing tiredly, she reached forward, showing the woman her bracelet as soon as she saw the tip. She asked, "Yes, you're the one wearing it. God, he's the one who helped find you. If you weren't wearing it, I'd hardly recognize you." Stoila shook her head again, then said quietly, "Who?" "I'm her sister, Miranda. Don't you remember me?" "Sister?" shocked, Miranda replied, attempting a few steps. "Yes, I am your big sister. I can see that you don't remember me. You don't remember having a sister at all, do you?" "No, I don't remember. But my mom didn't tell me I had a sister." The woman smiled sadly. "You must mean the mom who raised you. I'm sorry, but I have to tell you everything. I thought you had been through your sibling all your life, but I'm not the daughter of the parents who raised you. I don't understand anything." "What do you mean?" shocked, asked Miranda. "My name is Cindy. If you want, I'll tell you everything now. I can see from you that you're shaken, Miranda. If you don't want to know, you should leave. At least I'll know that I found you and won't have to suffer anymore. I've made sure you're okay and you're happy. Tell me everything," quietly said Miranda, and even looked at the tip of Miranda's dangling bracelet. She sighed. Without taking her eyes off it, she said, "These speakers were given to us by my grandmother. Her name was Kathy. I remember her well because I was older. She was a wonderful woman. She loved us so much, and she gave us these speakers to you and me. And you know what the most interesting thing about it is? Because it's not even a pendant. It used to be earrings that were given to our grandmother when she was in Germany. She was a ballerina when she was young. She danced on the big stage. She had tons of fans. And then the war happened, and she ran away. These earrings were given to her by a very rich man. He was taking care of her grandmother. They were very unusual earrings for each earring. There's a secret wall in the back that hides little diamonds behind it. You know there are diamonds there." Stood, shocked, nodded. Cindy sighed contentedly and continued talking about grandmothers of the wounded. "When we were born, she made them into fists, and when we got older, she gave them to each of us. It was so touching. She gave each of us a necklace, and "You're so important," hung it around her neck. "I'm really surprised it's still there. So much has happened to you. I don't know how it wasn't taken from you. Who did? Who should have taken it from me?" Miranda asked in a trembling voice. Cindy sighed again, and she told her everything. Yes, Miranda's real parents were not Sebastian and Lisa at all. Those people had adopted the girl when she was 4 years old. Cindy Miranda's parents were Kevin and Christina. When Evan was born, Kevin was quite normal. 5 years later, or was fired from the factory. Maybe it's impossible to say now if he was guilty or if he was framed, but at the time, Kevin claimed he was not guilty of anything. He got into a fight with his coworkers, who reported him to their superiors. And for that, Kevin got another 15 days in jail. And that's when he started drinking. He struggled with her husband's drinking at first. She supported him after he was fired, and she told him everything would be okay. She was sure he would find a job. But Kevin was in no hurry to even look for one. He was happy with everything. He drank every day and sentenced how unfairly he had been treated by the people he had worked with for years. And soon she felt that things were getting tight. It was hard for her to support her family. She was working every day, taking extra shifts. It was hard enough because she worked as a nurse in a hospital. And then she made one of her biggest mistakes. She started bringing alcohol home from work. She did it so her husband wouldn't spend money on booze. And Kevin loved it. Only one time Christina didn't catch it, the head nurse. This woman had always been before marriage, and she knew Christina's small child and difficult living situation. She didn't report the infraction to her superiors, but she had a serious talk with Christina, and she explained that she would ruin herself if she indulged her husband. Christina listened on nodding, agreed with everything the head nurse said, and she promised her that she would not steal alcohol again. She didn't think to herself that she couldn't leave her husband. As she'd been advised, she loved Kevin, and he wasn't always like that. I didn't realize things were about to change. He just needs to get over his depression. However, the depression lingered too long. As time went on, nothing changed. And one day she couldn't stand it and had a drink with her husband. And from then on, she took a little bit every day. She'd come to work with booze on her breath. But behind the mask, no one suspected a thing. Slowly, Christina got used to having alcohol in her blood every day. And then she found out she was pregnant. Maybe she wanted to get rid of the baby. Where would they go for another birth? If she went on maternity leave, they would be out of money altogether. But she kept putting off going to the doctor, forgetting the time. And she didn't keep track of her due date at all. And when she finally got to the doctor, she was surprised to find out that she was already 5 months pregnant. Naturally, turnover was out of the question. What I didn't realize was that things were about to get really rough. At work, she told me she was going on maternity leave soon. Everyone who knew about her situation twisted their heads. They thought she was out of her mind, if she was going to have another baby in this situation. But they didn't give a damn, just like they didn't care about their future child. Instead of continuing to drink every day, they just cut back a little bit. Neither Christina nor Kevin thought it might be harmful to the baby. When she went on maternity leave, Cindy's grandmother came to visit. Kathy lived in another town. She would sometimes come to visit her, but she hadn't for a long time because she hadn't wanted to previously. She didn't want her mother to see the state their family was in. When her grandmother arrived, she took on Cindy and Christina. She made Cindy do her homework, and Cindy quickly pulled Christina up to school. Kathy was forbidden to drink and disobeyed her because she was afraid of her overbearing mother. It was the best time she could remember, even when Grandma was with them. When Miranda was born, it was Grandma who fiddled with her for the first year, not just feeding her. And it was Grandma who gave them those pendants that used to be her chips. Miranda was still very young. Cindy, on the other hand, was already 9 years old, and she remembered perfectly all the stories her grandmother had told her. Cindy dreamed that she would grow up and go somewhere far away, never to see her parents again, from whom she had seen little good. Grandma handed them both chains at first, but then she gathered her chain by the table. Cindy 2 chains with columns, and said to her arrow, "Still too young to understand anything. But you, my dear, are already so grown up and very smart. And I'll tell you this, these columns have great power. They will protect you. And one day they will save you from great misfortune, help you find true happiness. But you must keep them safe. I'll give you both pendants, and when Miranda grows up, you will give it to him, and pass on my words. You understand me. I rely on you a lot. I can't trust your parents. They can't not give you these columns because they're very valuable. And I'll show you a secret they're hiding." And Grandma showed me that on each column, the back wall slides away, revealing another gem, and even promised that she would give the pendant to Miranda when she grew older, as long as she kept them in a safe place. Cindy believed that everything would continue to be fine. After all, Grandma wasn't going anywhere. But it didn't last long. When Miranda was 2 years old, Grandma died suddenly. Or rather, how suddenly? No, not suddenly, of course. She was already an old person, and like all old people, she had ailments that drained her of her vitality. As soon as Grandma died, Kevin and Christina began to drink with relentlessness and vigor. It was as if they recognized that they were left without the supervision of the strict Kathy. For too long, Kathy had kept them in a tight grip, and after losing control, the couple went off the chain, as they say. Cindy kept an eye on her sister because her parents didn't care about either of them, and even kept Miranda's pendant to give to her sister later. When the time was right, Cindy fed. Miranda took her to Kupala's garden. Her parents at home drank all the time, taking occasional breaks to go to the store. Miranda and Cindy didn't starve because Christina still cooked regularly. But sometimes they had to go to bed and only had some cookies, and after drinking tea, Cindy didn't know what would happen to them next. She longed to grow up soon so that she could be responsible for herself. And then she would both freeze and reconsider. And then a terrible thing happened. Their parents died. While Miranda was even in kindergarten at school, Christina and Kevin drank fallen vodka and poisoned themselves. When Cindy and Miranda got home, the parents were already dead. Miranda did not see them. Cindy was the first to enter the room and saw the parents appearing on the floor with foam on their faces. Of course, Cindy didn't let her sister into the room so she wouldn't see this horrible picture. Cindy left her sister in the kitchen, instructing her to sit on a chair, and went to the neighbors to call the police. The police called the paramedics, and they pronounced her dead, and even heard the police officers start talking about the girls who had been left unattended. The neighbor explained that they had no relatives, but she promised that she would sit with them for a few days until the guardianship authorities came. And so it was settled, and from that moment life changed dramatically. Before going to the neighbor, Cindy collected a little bit of them, made up things, and she, of course, took the pendant with her. And at the first sleepover at the neighbor's house, she told her sister, who was very scared before what was happening, "You don't have to be afraid. Everything will be fine." Then Cindy put a chain around her sister's neck with the pendant and told her of all things always it will protect you, and no matter what happens, keep him safe. We will always recognize each other by these pillars. And further showed her pendant that was hanging around her neck. And the next day, Cindy ran away. She had already decided for herself that she didn't want to go to the orphanage. She knew that nothing good would come of it. She and her sister would be separated anyway. So if anyone was to be adopted, it would be Miranda, because she was only 4 years old, and then she was an adult. She was already 12 years old, and she thought she could survive on her own. She'd figure something out, and she'd be fine. She'll be fine. She's still so young, and she's got her whole life ahead of her. When Cindy grows up, she'll find a boyfriend, and they'll be happy. Somehow, Cindy was sure that the orphanage would be like a prison, and she thought that only by staying outside the orphanage would she be free. It seemed to her that only good things were ahead of her. Except Cindy didn't take into account the fact that she would be a minor. Of course, she took her documents with her, her birth certificate. But if she went anywhere, she would be seized and sent to an orphanage. Cindy wouldn't tell Miranda how she survived to adulthood. She didn't go to school. She picked herself up. She lived with homeless people. She was lucky nothing bad happened to her. No one abused her. No one seriously hurt her. She didn't tell Miranda what she had to eat. When she lived in the basements, it was nothing. It wasn't until she turned 18 that she breathed a sigh of relief. As soon as she got her papers, she got a job as an orderly at the health center and took it easier. She was still sleeping in the basement, saving money. Then she got a job as a store clerk, and she began to believe that everything would be all right. After a couple months, she was able to rent a tiny apartment with old renovations. For the first time in years, she had her own private corner where she could do whatever she wanted, and no one could scold her for it. No one was watching her or peeping at her. She was free and happy. Except that very soon, she even realized that she was a long way from complete happiness. And she realized that to be happy, she needs a lot of things. She needed something she couldn't achieve on her own. She lived in a rented apartment. Her salary as a saleswoman allowed her to rent an apartment, to eat, to spend on the most necessary needs, and even try to save a little bit at a time. But after a while, she realized that she would live like that, and she would not have her own personal home. If she did not have a job, she would just end up on the street again. That couldn't be allowed to happen. And after some thought, Cindy realized that she couldn't manage on her own for long. She needed someone to be there for her. She needed a family. She needed a husband. And then she started looking at all the men that surrounded her clients: stores, security guards, movers, bus drivers, neighbors. She latched onto them all. Cindy was the only one nobody paid attention to. And then a young guy got a job at the store. He worked as a handyman, and he was quite good looking, but he was very quiet. Some people thought he was a little crazy. He was so quiet and brooding all the time. To be honest, and even at first I thought so. It was only later that Cindy found out that this guy had his own one-bedroom apartment. And when Cindy found out, she realized she had no right to pass up the chance. No one was really in touch with Robert, so Cindy started hunting him down. She smiled at them, winked flirtatiously. She always greeted him politely and with a smile when she saw him, and she made an effort to talk to him. At first, Robert had avoided Cindy. She had intimidated him. But then he got used to her smiling at him all the time. He started to like it. He started talking to her. I even realized he wasn't sick or stupid at all. Maybe a little dumb, but not critical. It wasn't long before Cindy achieved her goal. Robert proposed to her, reluctantly, ineptly, too stupidly, but he did. And Cindy said yes, and they modestly signed. No big celebrations. Neither he nor she had many friends, so it was a modest marriage for two. Cindy happily gathered her things from the rented apartment, with triumph handed the keys to the landlady, and left her first shelter. She moved in with her husband. It must be said that compared to the one-room apartment, and his housing was for her huge sums. Yes, without repair. Yes, with old furniture. But it was her own. Now she didn't even have to pay rent. Now she could afford more, but she could buy herself clothes, cosmetics, something good to eat. Now she had someone to take care of her. Except things weren't as rosy as Cindy had imagined. Robert was a weak man. He lost his parents early. He was only 10 years old. He was raised by his grandmother, who was in very poor health. She too died when Robert was only 18 years old. The boy was left alone. His grandmother brought him up in such a way that the guy was constantly afraid for his health. And for him, he put himself first. It just so happened that they were both looking for in each other what they both needed. They wanted each other's care, support, and attention, and each couldn't or wouldn't give it to the other. Cindy soon realized that she wasn't happy with her husband, so she started trying to change him. She tried to make him self-confident, self-aware, but Robert hit his head in the sand every time he needed to prove himself. And Cindy despaired. One day they were invited to a birthday party, and at the party Robert felt so awful that he even drank a little. In his normal life, he doesn't drink at all. And that's when Cindy saw a different Robert. He had loosened up. He was outgoing, cheerful, and confident. She was even surprised to find that he was the soul of the company that evening. They returned home in a great mood and even praised us for the fact that he was already trying to change. However, the next day it became clear that all yesterday's magic was just a side effect of the alcohol he had drunk. Robert realized it himself, and even lowered his hands, seeing his wife frowning more and more. Increasingly dissatisfied with him, Robert went to extreme measures. He began to drink a little sometimes to please his wife, and on such days, everything was fine between them. He claimed he was trying to change, and even at first she believed him when he drank only a little, but when the doses began to increase, she began to smell the odor of alcohol from him. That's when she realized he was doing terrible things. He's just drinking. Yes, Robert got used to alcohol very quickly, but for a long time he refrained from daily use. But after a few years, he couldn't stop anymore, and he needed to drink all the time. He became an alcoholic. She couldn't go any further. She was used to living with him. Going back to a rented apartment, she didn't want to. It wouldn't be a life. She'd get nothing in the divorce. Robert's apartment was inherited from his grandmother. Cindy had no rights to it, and Cindy continued to live with Robert, feeling like she was going downhill, and she was on the verge, ready to drop everything and start over. How possible is that? How did one of the most important events in her life happen? Cindy got pregnant. She had never thought about having a child, but when she got pregnant, she realized that she wanted one so badly that she was trembling. And she figured Robert would quit drinking when he found out they were having a baby. But she was wrong. Robert didn't stop drinking. He started drinking even more, and he had no interest in the baby. He didn't care about anything. Cindy was in her last month of pregnancy when Robert was fired from his job for drinking. She was furious. She gave him such a scandal that she went into premature labor. Robert was very frightened. They even took her to the hospital in an ambulance. Thank God, she was safely discharged, and the baby was fine. Cindy fed herself something, so let herself down and induced labor. But it had an effect on Robert. From that day on, he quit drinking, quit altogether. Yeah, he had withdrawal. He was terribly thirsty. When Cindy came out of the hospital with the baby, she could see in his eyes that he was desperate for a drink. Cindy tried to keep him down, but in every way possible burdened him with housework to keep him busy all the time. She kept handing him a small earring, and he obediently did everything she said. And then Cindy said it was time for him to look for a job, and Robert quickly found one. Things seemed to be getting better. I even breathed a sigh of relief. Husband doesn't drink, works, helps out. The child is healthy and calm. He's developing according to his age. I even felt some semblance of happiness, because there was some anxiety in my soul, as if something bad would happen. I even chased bad thoughts away from myself, but I still felt uneasy. And for good reason, because soon Robert started drinking again. Lisa was only 4 years old when her father started drinking again. By then, Lisa was already in kindergarten. Cindy went to work. She found a job at a store 5 minutes from home, and the pay was better than her last job. Then Robert started coming home drunk again and didn't know what to do. She couldn't leave now, that's for sure. She had a baby in her arms. If she could move out on her own, live in bad conditions, deny herself something, she couldn't go anywhere with a baby in her arms. She's responsible for Lisa. She had to protect her and keep her safe. So she tried again to talk some sense into her husband. Only this time, nothing worked. And Robert became violent. He could take a swing at Cindy, push her around if he didn't like something. And she even became afraid of him. A little more time passed, and then disaster struck. One day, Robert came home in an unhinged state. He could barely stand on his feet. In addition, he also lost his wallet, in which was his salary for the month, and even more could not hold back. He and Robert had a fight, and Robert tried to attack his wife with a knife in his hand. Little Lisa witnessed her parents' quarrel. She huddled in a corner with her hands over her mouth and cradling her favorite teddy bear. If Robert had been a little more sober, he might have hurt Cindy or even killed her, but he had killed himself. Unable to stand on his counting feet, Robert fell and hit his head on the edge of the table. He fractured his skull. He dropped dead, bled out, and died. Died right in front of his daughter and his wife. Cindy immediately called an ambulance and the police, and she herself locked herself in the bedroom with Lisa, who didn't utter a word. Not until the security services arrived, not even charged with murder, as she'd feared. The fact that Robert was drunk and had a knife in his hand played into her hands. A frightened, sober wife and a shaken child did not arouse the police's suspicion. Death by accident was recorded. And that was it. Cindy was free, and the apartment was now hers and her daughter's. She didn't have to worry anymore. She could feed her child on her own. And now she had her own place. Well, Cindy had a hard life. She thought everything would be all right now, but it wasn't. After the accident that caused her father's death, little Lisa stopped talking. At first, she even thought that her daughter was just shocked by what had happened. But when a month had passed, she still hadn't spoken. Cindy sounded the alarm. Then her teacher called her and told her that Lisa was not answering in class when asked. At first, they didn't touch her. They thought she was a little out of it after her father's death. But then it became clear that something was wrong with Lisa. It was as if she understood everything, did what she was told, wrote her tests with A's and B's, but she didn't speak. She didn't respond. She was just speechless. Even started taking her to doctors. But no one knew what was wrong with the girl. She was adequate, smart, savvy, quite sane, but she just wouldn't speak. They even said it was all on a psychological level. Cindy started going to psychologists, pours a lot of money into it, but there was no effect. The girl was even put into hypnosis, and that had no effect. But all these trips to doctors took a lot of money, and even bogged down in debt, and then in loans. As time went on, Cindy tried to cure her daughter, but nothing worked. She stopped paying the loans because there was no money. And then, he started getting harassed by debt collectors. And that's when Cindy got sick herself. She got really sick. She was diagnosed with cancer. She needed expensive surgery, and Cindy didn't know what to do. And when the doctor said she couldn't wait, Cindy went to the extreme. She sold her apartment and moved to this brand on the outskirts of the city. She used the money from the apartment sale to have the surgery, and the rest to pay off her loans. But the surgery didn't go quite as well as everyone had hoped. Something went wrong. There were complications, and she even got sick. They damaged something in her spine, and she needed another surgery. But then there was no money to do it. And she just lay in that arch, receiving a disability pension and fading away quietly, dying of despair. And Lisa taking care of her mother, going grocery shopping and cooking. She took on the role of full-time caregiver. Cindy looked at the steel with tear-wet eyes. Miranda was crying, too. She couldn't believe everything she had heard, but she knew it was true. It was only now, after Cindy's story, that she began to remember something. She remembered the girl who had given her the pendant and told her everything would be all right. And she remembered a place where there were lots of children. It must have been an orphanage. She couldn't remember anything else. So she was adopted. And why didn't they tell her the truth? Why didn't Mommy and Daddy tell her? She had a right to know everything, but now she couldn't ask. They had no one to ask. She stood and cried. Then she stammered and said, You weren't looking for me. You weren't at all interested in looking for me. As soon as I got married, I felt that I had a firm footing. I went to the orphanage, but they told me you were adopted almost immediately. As soon as you got there. Of course, they wouldn't tell me anything about you, no matter how much I begged. I tried to find any information on my own. I searched by last name, by first name, for any hints. Nothing. And then Robert started drinking. I realized that even if I did find you, I had no right to come into your life with my drunk to traumatize you again. No, not again. Miranda shook her head slightly. Then she looked at the pendant. How did you find it after all? It didn't recognize me somehow. Cindy waved away her tears and clenched her pendant in her fist. There was an interview on TV, and you were on it. I looked at you, and your face looked familiar. I realized later that you looked just like our mother. I saw a bracelet on your arm with this pendant. Your arm was on full screen. I was shocked. Then I saw your name. It was a last name. I don't know it, and the middle name was different, but the first name. As soon as I saw the name Miranda, I knew it was you. I realized I had found my sister. I wrote this note and told Lisa where to go. And she found you. Not right away. She's been going to the administration for 2 weeks, but she couldn't see you. I got desperate and told her not to go anymore, but she kept going there every day, trying to see you. Miranda took her sister's hand and squeezed it tightly. Everything is going to be okay now. Now we have each other. Now we'll be together. And I have my own person again, Miranda said. Cindy exclaimed with a glimpse of Lisa. Then she said, Lisa, go to the kitchen and make coffee in your aunt's room. Lisa left the room, even making sure Lisa started rattling the dishes in the kitchen, quietly and hurriedly said, don't get any ideas. I didn't call you here for money, and I'm not asking you for help. Yes, but not material help. You'll think it's something bad. I'm only asking for help with one thing. Miranda is my sister. When I die, take care of Lisa, and I beg you, don't abandon her. If I could, I'd get on my knees. But unfortunately, I can't physically and peacefully die, and that she will be left all alone. Her life will be broken. She's already big, and no one is saying she can't be adopted. Worse things could happen. They might send her to a mental hospital. They'll think she's crazy, but she's not crazy. Miranda, she's sane and sane. She just doesn't talk, and it's not her fault. It's my fault and Robert's. I am very afraid that she will be alone after I die, and may I die before I know she will be okay. Miranda looked at her sister in horror. What are you saying? I just gained a sister and you're saying you're going to die. No, you can't do that. I don't want to. You have to stay with me. You mustn't talk about dying. Why do you say that? No, I won't let it happen. I won't let it happen. Do you hear me? I won't let you die. Cindy shook her head. Please don't yell, Lisa, maybe it was worth hearing. Let's be realistic. I feel like I don't have much left. It's too hard. I've had a life of too much misery and hardship. It's all gotten to me. I don't have the strength to fight anymore. I just want to go quietly. But the worry for her won't let me go. I'm holding on with all my might. But now I found you. I know you won't leave Lisa. You care about her, don't you? And I can leave in peace. And my last days will be brightened by your presence. I'll be the happiest person in the world. That's the most I could ever ask for. That's all I need. No. And I don't want to listen to you anymore. I'm not gonna let you do this. I'm not gonna let you walk away again. Did you hear me when I was a little girl and I didn't know what I was doing? I don't remember anything, but you walked away and you left me. But I won't let you do it again. You can't leave me again. You hear me? I'll do anything to make this one better. I have money. I have connections. I have opportunities. I have everything. You hear me? And I'm gonna save you. And you're gonna be by my side. And you're gonna be okay. And your daughter's gonna be fine. And she kept her promise. Water took care of her sister. Miranda went to the best doctors at the best clinics. First, of course, she took Cindy and Lisa to her home. Cindy was waiting when the crutch arrived. Never before in her life had she been in such a posh apartment. But what touched her the most was Miranda's concern. She couldn't even dream that her sister would want to communicate with her. In fact, when she sent her daughter with the note, she was just hoping for a little help. She had hoped that Miranda would just take care of Ira. But when Miranda took both her and Lisa to her home, Cindy was just in shock. Top doctors examined Cindy. Her diagnosis was confirmed. She no longer had cancer. She was in remission, but the effects were very unpleasant. And the doctors said that if there had been even the slightest delay, Cindy would have been permanently paralyzed. It was a very difficult situation. There was a risk that the doctors would not be able to fix anything, but there was also a chance that everything would get better and she would be able to move, walk, and even run again. After a while, they even did a new surgery, and then followed by another one. She was in the best hospital, under the supervision of the best doctors. She had a nurse with her around the clock to help her, and Miranda paid for all this. Miranda herself came to see her sister every day, and Lisa came with her. Lisa was unrecognizable. The girl had happiness written all over her face. She was happy that her mother was alive, and that the surgery had been successful, and she was happy that she had gained the aunt who had saved her mom. Miranda, meanwhile, went ahead with her plans. She went to the best therapist she could find. She brought Lisa to his office for an appointment. The doctor for 2 o'clock just talked to Lisa and watched her reaction. The girl never uttered a single word. But after the session, the doctor told Miranda that the situation could improve. He was sure that the girl could talk, she just didn't want to. Miranda was very surprised by this verdict. She didn't believe the doctor, but he told her one thing. You see, something had happened, some kind of psychological trauma. And I think at that moment, the girl's head got a little short-circuited. She put a silence block in her head. And that block needs to be removed. I'll try to do that. But if you want my opinion, she has to want to do it. She can remove it, but only if she wants to. I'm even curious to work with her for the sake of interest. I'm sure that if she talks, it won't even be to my credit, only hers. After these words, Miranda decided that she will take her to see this specialist. She should make every effort to help the girl. Miranda had already taken a liking to Lisa. She was so happy to have a niece, as if she had gained a child that she herself could not give birth to. Time passed. Cindy managed. Lisa was seeing a therapist. Miranda was happy. She was no longer alone. When Cindy had completed the necessary rehabilitation, she was allowed to walk again. Only for this she had to train for a long time. But soon she was even able to walk out of the hospital on her own legs. She was being held by her sister on one side and her own baby daughter on the other. All three of them were smiling so joyfully. After a few days, Stoila brought Cindy to her doctor's appointment again. When she was taking her, the doctor asked to talk to her alone, and he said, "No more, you can bring her. I did the best I could." "Did she talk?" I asked hopefully. "No, she didn't talk. I'm telling you, I did everything I could. And for some reason, I have a feeling she's gonna talk soon. If she does, please call me and tell me so. I'll be very happy to hear the good news." After another month, Cindy could already walk across the room unaided, and there was no pain. They were a little hard, and she tired quickly, but she walked. She moved her legs, she moved her arms, and she had no pain. The first time it happened, Miranda clapped her hands. Cindy, happy, smiled, looking at her sister. Just then, the sisters heard a foreign voice, and it seems there is no one in the world happier than me. Both women turned towards Lisa. The girl smiled, and then she said, "I'm not afraid anymore. I am no longer afraid. And now I can say I love you so much. Mommy, Aunt Miranda, there's no one in the world more precious than you. I'm so glad you're all right." Cindy sobbed with happiness and stretched her arms forward. Lisa jumped up and hugged her mother. Miranda, wiping away her tears, walked over to them and hugged them too. And so the three of them stood hugging each other for a long time with all three of their eyes closed. They enjoyed each other's company. None of the three were lonely anymore. And all three of them knew that everything would be okay now because they were together. In just 4 years, each of their lives had already changed in ways they could not have imagined. I was going to university. She was an excellent student. Miranda even helped to open her own store and even became a successful entrepreneur. And Miranda herself, she had a tremendous change in her life. Worth married a very good man who loved her madly. And Worth it got pregnant, which was out of the realm of possibility, and Worth it. She was happier than she'd ever been in her life.